It's very ironic and it's very sad to see how our culture has developed to become this hyper conservative, anti sexuality, and sex negative culture. And I know I'm using these liberal leftist words, but trust me, I don't mean what those people mean. I'm trying to say that the conservatives and the pro-culturalists and pro-traditionalists in our culture have gone to the other extreme, to the point that they are not only sex negative, they are literally apprehensive and repressive of anything that's sexual in nature, to the extent that the very idea or any sort of conversation related to intimacy would be considered as taboo. And as a consequence, the population in our country is also slowly declining. As per the latest statistics that has been done in our country, the main culprit, I think, behind such kind of mentality is the education system and also the wrong perception about religion. Because if you really look at the religious doctrines, it's typically Islam, because in the Desi cultures, mostly people practice the religion of Islam. You'd think that people here share the same opinion as that of the Islamic teachings and guidelines, but no, they only cherry pick those verses and those ayats, those sayings of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that they find to be relatable, that serves their self-interest, and they basically cast out the other verses that they find a little frowned upon in their society. My issue is, I understand they do it because of cultural reasons, because our culture is apparently more conservative than the religion of Islam itself. If you denormalize the healthy practice of one's sexuality, or doing things like intermixing within the halal boundaries, within the Islamic framework, as long as it's not going to the level of flirtations or indecent conversations, as long as you're keeping it formal and as long as you're maintaining the minimum standard that you need to have a decent conversation between the opposite genders in our society, I don't feel like there should be any problem. But the ultra conservative traditionalists would separate themselves from any sort of human contact between the opposite sexes. So, consequently, they lack any sort of conversation and communication skills. And not only that, the education system also is unable to teach the children, the youngsters, the dynamics between the both genders, the intersexual dynamics, how each others behave and what each other prioritize. As a result, both the genders are clueless about how to interact with other people, especially from the opposite gender, and also how to maintain a basic communication skill. If somebody closes the gateway to gain knowledge through halal way, obviously that will open the gateway from the haram way, and people would then exploit that haram way to gain those knowledges. For example, since in our science classes there's no explicit, extensive discussion about the sexuality and sexual preferences and how our bodies work, people, instead of learning these things from academic curriculums, they are learning these things from the internet, which is taking them to another whole new rabbit hole. And when they go down in this bottomless, deep abyss of a rabbit hole, they get sucked into it and they develop bad habits, addictions, and unhealthy mindset. And they also develop negative impressions about the opposite genders and how they should behave and communicate. They learn things like how to take protections, how to keep themselves away from STI, from sources that are haram, which they could have otherwise learned from academic institutions in a halal and safe way. And after they have developed this addiction, let's say, for example, pornography, they're unable to talk about it with their peers or relatives simply because these kinds of topics are taboo. And so they're unable to get help. And I understand that in our religion we gotta be discreet about our sins, but at least there should be some sort of community where you can maintain anonymity and get help at the same time. So people should have these kinds of conversations. And I know when I'm saying this, I'm appearing as if I am a staunch liberal myself, but trust me, I am pro religion, and I am every part of me is kind of liberal. I'm kind of free spirited, minus for my religious side. Now let's come to the religious side. From religious point of view, talking to the opposite sex, having some conversation under certain context, out of necessity, and with or because of the intention, because of your intention for marriage, is not haram. But according to our ultra culturalist, traditionalist, conservative culture, it is. So this is a proof that our culture is more traditional, more conservative than our religion. At the same time, um, let's take maintaining eye contact, for example. As long as you're not doing it too much, as long as you're not appearing creepy, you're not making other people uncomfortable, or you're not looking at someone with lust or desire without any intention of marriage. Obviously, then you will be committing haram. But our ultra conservative traditionalist society will want you to get rid of this idea that you can look at anyone, especially particularly of the opposite sex, under any circumstances, not even in case of marriage. They would encourage the youth to lower their gaze, but they would never teach them that under certain some circumstances it's rather encouraged by our Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in multiple hadiths, where he said that if your intention is to get married, you better look at the woman you are getting married to. In that hadith, he basically was talking to a person, a Sahabi, about Ansari woman. Not only that, even in the Quran, there is a story about Moses conversing with two women in a desert after he got ostracized from his community in Egypt because of killing a man. He was conversing with those girls because there was apparently some necessity, because he wanted to help them. And we can link that scenario with modern day job scenarios, how you should interact professionally with other women in those circumstances. But the ultra conservative traditionalist society would never have these conversations with you, would never even tell you when it's okay to have conversations or when it's okay to look at a woman and how you should look at women. They'll only tell you that as long as you're lowering your gaze and the first look is halal, and after that, anything beyond that periphery, that's it. So, what do you expect the youth to learn from these kinds of anecdotes, from these kinds of mentality? This is the reason why I think the Desi culture breeds incel. The Even the people who are educated formally through their high schools, the universities, because during those times that they don't get close to these Islamic jurisprudence, so that they get to know about what's halal and what's haram. So they would spend, like, even in their late 20s and 30s, being ignorant about these basics of Islam and how intergender dynamics work in Islam. However, the things that they were taught societally by those ultra conservative traditionalists will still remain ingrained in their mind, which prohibits them from pursuing any long-term relationship in a married and halal manner until they are in their mid-30s. And I think this is very unhealthy, because if the marriage system is made difficult societally. Obviously, the people would look another avenues to fulfill their biological needs, and that's why you'll also find statistics of why Pakistani youth or Desi youth indulging themselves with illicit substances, illicit materials that they see on the internet. And also, not to mention, there are other things such as how the Bollywood culture has been integrated and has penetrated into our marriage system. People don't even know how the Islamic marriage works. It's very simple. You only need mahar, wali, and wakil, two witnesses. And in Hanafi mazhab, which this opponent follows, and which is the most lax and liberal mazhab, here you don't even need the wali's approval. So marriage relatively is far easier in this Desi culture compared to how it is in the Middle East or America or UK, for example. Even then, people are facing difficulty when it comes to marriage. Why is that? Obviously, there's no other reason except for the fact that the culture has made it difficult, the society has made it difficult. So nowadays, you would need not only high mahar price if you are established after 30s, but also you have to pay high price for the wedding ceremony, for photographers, for video, for dancers, music, all other haram and things. Not only those things are expensive, those things are also very dilutive in nature. And this is why it sickens me to see how our Muslim culture, or Islamic country, where 90% of the population is Islam, you think that these kinds of pagan rituals, especially what came from the Bollywood, would not have penetrated into our culture, into our marriage system. But you couldn't be further from the truth. And because of these things, uh, not only you have made yourself difficult to marry, it also made you sinful and also expensive. You're spending a huge chunk of money only to become a dayut because you're showing off your wife to thousands of men, photographers, and guests. I think this is very unnatural and unhealthy. And like I said before, most people don't even know how the marriage system works in our country. So they think that they must have these ceremonies like Gai Holo, the wedding ceremony, uh, and all these things that I don't even know of that came from Bollywood. And so people are less incentivized to get married. This further delays their any sort of willpower to pursue any sort of halal relationship. And if you were aware of the Islamic jurisprudence, you would have found some sort of leeway to make things halal between the boyfriend and girlfriend, if you are in any sort of halal haram relationship, by just gathering these two witnesses and a mahar. But since they don't know these rulings of how Islamic marriage works, they keep on continuing their haram relationship instead of cutting them right there and there, or at least making them halal, or marrying secretly. And obviously, that woman, if she really loves you, would want to marry you despite you having no job and if you are unable to pay mahar, because uh, there's this thing called VCR marriage where women can give away some of their rights. And I think in this contemporary society where marriage has been made difficult and society has become hypersexualized, VCR is getting more popular and more practical. But people don't know about how to make things halalized, to make things halal, and how to pursue relationship in a healthy and halal manner. So what they're doing is they're either getting themselves into haram or they're abstaining themselves, which is extremely difficult, especially if you are a youth and you are surrounded by billboards, posters, posts on the internet where the society is hypersexualized and sexuality is encouraged. And if you're watching Netflix, YouTube, etc., and when you're surrounded by students and females who are at their peak of their beauty, when testosterone is scourging through your veins, you would obviously find it very difficult. And trust me, fasting would not prevent you from having these desires. Yes, it might diminish your desire to a certain extent, but you still have to have some sort of self-control, and it's very difficult. So that's what's happening in our culture, in our country. Either you are abstaining or you're getting into harm until you get married, of course. And when you're getting married after 35, chances are that your interest for marriage, your interest for women, has diminished so much that you are unable to form bond. Because obviously, if you have been through multiple relationships, you would view any sort of relationship how you view items on a buffet. You would think that you should consume an item and then try out another. You would have always have this mentality that grass is greener on the other side, and you develop this mindset, especially when it's pushed down by social media, that you should not settle for less. So you are not even satisfied in those kinds of marriages, especially when you had a lot of experience in your past, compared to those people who got married in the previous century, who formed traditional relationships. They were content with their spouses because those were the only person they knew, and therefore they could not compare and contrast between their exes and their past relationships experience. It's almost like a drug. Your first intake of drug would always have the most memorable experience, and after that the experience still fade away, but the addiction still remains. Similarly, in relationships, your first relationship will always be magical, but soon after, as you delay, as you go through a lot of relationships, that charm fades away. You get disenchanted with relationships, but that addiction to pursue another person simply for that butterfly, simply for those highs, for those cheap thrills, still remains. So either in our society, people are gonna get into haram, and only a minor subset of men and women are indulging themselves in illicit and unlawful relationships. But most men, especially since they're living in this hyper conservative, which is apparently more conservative than the religion of Islam itself, despite people of the subcontinent following the most liberal madhab, which is the Hanafi madhab, still, because of that ultra conservative society and culture, they are unable to get married in halal way. And also because of ignorance, because the education system has failed us to let us know about what our religion says about how marriage should be and how easy and simple it is. And because of the wrong perception of a religion, and because of mixing the ideas, our perceptions about how marriage and relationship should be from society with religion, because of people's ignorance, and because of conflating these two, people are also leaving Islam because of finding it very difficult to follow in our contemporary society. And therefore, a lot of men has given up their hope, and they have become incels, and they have been married, and they got married to their hand instead of asking other women's hand in marriage. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say to you all in this YouTube video. And if you have enjoyed it, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel, and let me know if I missed anything, or if you want to share your opinion, your thoughts about this issue. I hope all of you stay well, take care, peace, and assalamu alaikum.